Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Week That Was. I am Saeed Khan, broadcasting from a bunker in suburban Chicago this Friday for some social event that I have to attend. But again, thanks to technology, we can all be together. Joining us, dressed in a more than just business casual today, is attorney Steve Fishman. Nice looking tie there, Fish.
Yeah, well, my wife's in charge of all that kind of stuff. She's very good at that. If it was up to me, I'd probably have some that didn't even match the suit, you know.
So I won't insult you by asking if it's a clip-on, but so single Windsor or double Windsor?
Double Windsor. That's one thing for some reason. Even a schlub like me learned how to tie a double Windsor, and now I really can't even tie a single one.
How low they've gone. Okay. Well, joining us with his own show on AM 910, we have Adolph Mongo.
Hey, how you doing? Good morning.
Good morning to you. We also have somebody from the other side of the microphone joining us, and unfortunately, someone who's going to be leaving us from Deadline Detroit, Michael Lucido.
Hi, everybody.
I hope you're getting something more in compensation than just an appearance on this show.
I'd have to wait for the going away party.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be there for that. Also joining us from Deadline Detroit, we have Nancy Derringer, who for the second week in a row is at home.
I am. I'm staying home for a while. So
excellent. And we have editor of Deadline Detroit, and now also add to that technical engineer, as well as man number 3 on a 5-man bobsled team, Allan Lengel.
Hey. Yes, if there's any technical failures, blame it on me today. So.
Well, there's enough going on in the world, there's enough going on locally, and there's enough going on nationally. So let's get started with Ukraine. An update, we are now into our third week of the crisis, whether you call it a special military campaign, a war, an invasion, or an incursion. It is still going on, and it seems as though it is intensifying. Putin's 10 to 40 mile long convoy, it might have been segmented into 10-mile sections, is now about 15 kilometers outside Kiev. The Ukrainians seem to be doing a gallant job of stopping it in its tracks, at least for now. But a lot's been going on. President Biden has revoked Russia's most favored nation status. We find a bombing of a disabled care facility, alongside earlier a bombing of a maternity hospital. And I understand that Nestle's has decided to suspend exports of Nespresso capsules into Russia. So bougie Russians are going to have to get a regular cup of joe like some of the rest of us. What's going on in the Ukraine, and what is yet to come, do you think?
We all do what we can, you know.
Yeah, it's just frightening to watch every day. I mean, like you say, I mean, the Ukrainians under the circumstances are doing as best they can, and they are fighting back. The question is how much more we're continuing to send, arms and all that stuff. But I mean, as long as they have the superiority in the sky, that seems to be their best shot at just decimating the country. It's just hard to stand by and watch. And I mean, the Russian economy has gotta really be hurting. Not to mention that McDonald's, there's 850 McDonald's in Russia, which that might have been our secret weapon to hurting the Russians. We should have kept McDonald's open. But anyways.
Well, so on the point of McDonald's, I mean, I was reading about a guy who apparently panicked and went and stocked his fridge and freezer to the rafters with McDonald's product. I don't think anybody told him that you actually don't need to put it in the freezer, mate. You just leave it out and it'll still be good 5 years from now. But you also mentioned, Alan, this whole idea about air superiority. And there's two things that have been proposed about that. One is a no-fly zone by NATO. And the other was kind of a hiccup for the Biden administration, that there seemed to be the authorization for Poland to send MiG-29s to Ukraine because Ukrainian pilots were trained on these Russian-made jets. And then in exchange for that, the United States would compensate Poland with F-16s and other aircraft. the Pentagon, at the very last minute, as Vice President Kamala Harris was already en route to Poland, pulled a plug on that. Is that a rookie mistake? Is that just showing how fluid the situation is? Anyone want to take that one on?
I think. Go ahead, Nance.
I will just say I think that it's probably a wise move. 3 weeks is an awful long time, for a country to be under bombardment. But I think we have to be extremely careful about how much we goad Vladimir Putin into a strike. Another potentially world devastating strike. I mean, I think sanctions are a great idea. They're going to isolate Russia even more than it's already isolated by what they've done. I don't know. I don't think Lindsey Graham's fantasy notwithstanding, I don't think we can count on anything happening to Vladimir Putin. But I think we shouldn't just think twice. We should think about 15,000 times before we take a step like a no-fly zone or military support by a third-party country before we potentially get into a war with Russia. And that's not to say. Go ahead.
What are we going to do when this is over and Putin marches into Georgia? I see the roadmap of what the Russians doing. They trying to regroup the whole Soviet Union. Today, I talked to a guy that was driving an Uber when I was in Arizona a couple weeks ago, and he was from Georgia, and he started talking about they worried. They say, Ukraine is going to go down, and they worried that they're going to march right into their country. What's going to happen with Putin? See, that's ours. He's doing what the Chinese is doing. They reclaiming all these old territories. And you know what? We're going to have to do something. Sitting back and say, well, we can send weapons or other aid via third countries. But what's going to happen when they do a second one?
Steve.
I read a very interesting article in the Post today talking about what would it take to do something about Putin. Forget Lindsey Graham because he's an idiot and an asshole. Okay, forget him. They talked about the oligarchs are not going to be the ones that are going to overthrow Putin or do anything to him, because while they are in partnership with him in terms of stealing money and spending it all over the world, they don't have access to the military, to the arms like that. They don't believe, this article didn't believe, it was some Russian expert, that the citizens can do it either for kind of the same reason. A lot of them are not getting accurate information, obviously. Those who do protest, then they get locked up or clubbed or whatever. I can't pronounce the Russian word, but it's something like Siloviki. That's the group of people who are basically the KGB types, let's say, who are also oligarchic in the sense that they have been making a lot of dough for the last 30 years. And this article suggested that when those people, the reason that Putin is so worried, the reason they're giving all this analysis, maybe there's something wrong with him mentally. Why is he sitting at the table so far from everybody else? They say that that's the only group he would be worried about. And it was a very interesting, it was a very interesting analysis of how these people operate. They operate under the radar, including, if they so chose, they could probably operate under Putin's radar. And that's the one thing that he's worried about. So I guess what I think what the article was saying, that's the people who are going to do something if anybody's going to do something. I think it's wishful thinking that, that the citizens themselves or that the oligarchs themselves can do it because they don't have the capacity, basically. I recommend anybody to read this article. It was fascinating.
So
I think one question.
Silovic is actually somebody who comes up from the military or the security sectors and becomes a politician, like Putin himself. I'm sorry, Alan, go ahead.
I was going to say it'd be interesting if, and Zelensky says that Putin is bluffing on this about using chemical weapons or whatever, but it'd be interesting at what point does the world just keep standing by if there were chemical weapons introduced, if things like that. I mean, who knows? It'd be interesting.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, just a springboard off that. Like the sanctions that they're imposing is great, but when you start kind of cornering a rabid dog and they have no other choices what to do. Is it's a little bit concerning to figure out, to just kind of see that he's kind of being backed in a corner, both economically and with not even succeeding so far at 3 weeks into this war with Ukraine. So
I think that Michael's got a really good point. I think that obviously we all know it's pretty clear after 3 weeks. I don't think anybody's afraid of the Russian army. The performance that the Russian army's done with pretty much clear skies and all these people and all these mechanized units and blah, blah, blah. No one's afraid of that. What's everybody afraid of? Nuclear weapons. Is the guy that crazy?
Right.
We've lived our whole lives, basically. Adolph and Alan and I, for sure. We lived our whole lives. We all remember the Bay of Pigs. We all remember Khrushchev banging with his shoe, when he was in the United Nations. And that's what we're worried, what people are worried about. And I agree with Nancy. You have to be worried about that. If the guy is a cornered rat, which Michael says and I think may eventually be true, what does a cornered rat do, particularly one who has absolutely no use for any other human being, including his own citizens?
Right.
So
him and Trump are very, two narcissists, but Putin's even crazier, I think, than Trump, really.
Well,
crazier.
one called the other a genius, and I think it's a possession arrow that only goes one way. So there has been evidence, it seems, pointing to the fact that Russia was using thermobaric weapons, which have the ability to suck the oxygen out of an area and essentially blow out your lungs, as well as cluster bombs. So the idea of possible war crimes occurring is on the table. But one dilemma, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but when it comes to bringing countries up to the international criminal courts, don't you have to be an actual signatory to the ICC? And I know that the United States is not, and I believe Russia might not be either.
I have to tell you that I might be an expert on criminal law in Detroit, and in federal court, I'm no expert on international law, but what you say makes sense. I don't see how anybody could be subject to the jurisdiction if they're not part of the court. I don't know.
And that would be a really interesting subpoena to serve on Putin. I don't know how that one would actually.
Well, I'm waiting to see if they do that, because it seems like the only people they put on trial in the international courts are African dictators and folks from South America somewhere. I want to see when they're going to start, or maybe Bosnia or a couple of places, see if they do that to someone like Putin.
Well, first they got to catch him and
Right.
Arrest him. I don't think that's going to happen. But you see the tables that he's sitting at, which I've told are a reflection of his paranoia. These ridiculously long, like the scene in Citizen Kane tables, with Putin at one end and three guys at the other end, because he doesn't want anybody to be able to lunge across the table and stick a poison dart in his neck, I guess.
So one of the rumors flying out there is that Putin is actually terminally ill with some form of cancer, maybe colon cancer, and that apparently, and this is just from, of course, the pundits and the prognosticators, his rather puffy face and dour demeanor are a function of chemotherapy and steroids. Now, the chemo I'm a little bit suspicious of, because that would require him to pencil back in his eyebrows and his hair. But from the steroids that might be involved, or the radiation poisoning, I suppose, like anything else, it seems like that's kind of wishful thinking. But this idea then of running out the clock on Putin, there's got to be a different solution or a different endgame plan. Michael, I know that the Russians and the Ukrainians had high-level talks in Antalya, Turkey, a couple of days ago that went nowhere. There are certain demands that Russia has, the recognition of Donetsk, the two provinces, as well as Crimea being independent, Ukraine writing into their constitution neutrality, that they will never, ever, ever, ever join NATO or the European Union, and a couple of other asks. I think maybe have National Putin Day in the Ukraine. There's got to be some movement on this. Where would you go ahead and draw the line?
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to Michael.
Where would I draw the line on that? I mean, he's just implementing his own pro-Putin, pro-Russia installments into these countries. So where at what point do you have to put down your foot and say, well, we can't allow this to happen. We can't allow you to infiltrate all these countries and their governments. I don't know where to put the foot down on that. Where would you stop that in its tracks with a guy like that? You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, once he goes into the NATO countries, I mean, there's no, I mean, and Farnell says that Georgia's part of NATO. I mean, if he goes into any NATO countries, there's no choice there. The question becomes also like, I mean, look, he's decimating some of the cities in Ukraine, and we're trying as best we can to send in equipment and stuff like that, but we're using restraint. The question is, if he starts using chemical weapons, where's the line? Do we still stand by and go, well, not our fight, we can't do that? I mean, look, at what point was World War II where people just said, finally, we gotta, I mean, we were forced into World War II. We were trying not to get into it, but, you know, it's a good question. I mean, obviously we're trying to avoid the nuclear weapon thing, but at what point do you just keep standing by?
So just one point of clarification, Georgia is not currently a NATO state.
Not, okay, all right.
But there are 3 former Soviet republics which are Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania.
Okay.
So it'll be really interesting to see if Putin threatens any of those to try to then provoke NATO into invoking Article 5, which says that an attack on one NATO member state is an attack on all. So still a long way it seems to go with an impasse on the Ukraine. The side's not moving, but 2.5 million people displaced externally, refugees out of population of 43 million. No one really knows the internal displacement of that. A lot of tropes coming out regarding what is called refugee racism, which seems to still continue. The treatment of those that are perhaps not cover boy or cover girl Ukrainian, facing discrimination getting into Poland and elsewhere. Is this just now the defining nature of Europe? Anyone?
Well, you know what? I'm still trying to understand. How can you practice racism when you fleeing bombs and planes and et cetera? They pulling Indian and African students off in trains and stuff. And then when they do make it, they going into a situation in Poland, one of the most racist country in Eastern Europe. And they got white nationalists patrolling the borders. So it's, you know what? It's just crazy. You know, people want to help the folks in Ukraine, but yet you still can't get rid of your racist views when it comes to trying to flee the Russians. You know, people still want to practice it, and you see it.
One of the more profound memes that I saw on this was that back in 2015, when I think 1 million refugees were pouring into Europe within a year, Europe was screaming bloody murder. They were saying we have a refugee crisis. And now within the last 2 weeks, they've absorbed 2 million with greeting people with pianos and offers for free room and board, suggesting that maybe Europe doesn't have a refugee problem, it has a racism problem. So that's something I suppose that we can always come back to as well. Nancy, I just didn't want to let this one go, though. Mentioning Lindsey Graham and the word fantasy in the same sentence, I still haven't recovered from that mental image. So I'm going to hold you
Sorry
to that.
about that.
Well, speaking of mental images, we had a State of the City address this week. There's a segue for you with Mayor Mike
You're
Duggan.
getting very good at these, though, I have to say.
What was said, and how much of it should we go ahead and place a certain level of optimism? Thoughts?
Adolph?
Well, you know what? Duggan is good at throwing numbers out there, but he didn't talk about the elephant in the room. That's crime, and that's the education. Detroit is bleeding blood in the streets. And it's the same old tune. You get the police chief out there saying, this is what we're doing. We caught this person, but it's out of control. There's no question that it's out of control. They don't have enough patrols in certain neighborhoods. And that's something that Duggan has never addressed. He leaves it to the police chief. He's like Teflon Don. Yeah, we got some projects. He had his black developers stand up and say, "Oh, they're part of rebuilding the city." That's because he's been getting criticized that black folks have been left out of the Renaissance of Detroit. But it's all about crime, and it's all about the educational problem that we have here in the city. DPS is, you know what, I don't know, what is it, 30,000 students? When I came back to Detroit, it was almost 200,000 students. Now you got about 30,000.
That's crazy.
And no one's saying anything. And the crime, they're still shooting at each other on the highways. You don't go on the lodge at a certain time. Either, they're going 100 miles an hour or more, or, you're just afraid to drive certain places. Can't get gas at certain places.
Right.
That's what he needed to talk about.
Yeah. I'll say he briefly addressed the crime issue, and while sort of taking and you're right, Adolph. I mean, you can throw out a few stats and say, okay, he basically said after June, when Chief James White took over from James Craig, things got better. So he took a shot at James Craig in one way, and he said, they got together, they started a new strategy, they tried to work with other agencies and prosecutors, saying that the homicides and shootings have gone down. But what does that mean? They've gone down from what to what? It doesn't make, as Adolph says, I mean, crime is still, in particular in neighborhoods, is really, really a big issue. Carjackings, as you say. I don't drive home on the Lodge Freeway. I drive home on a Saturday night. If I'm out in the burbs, I drive down Woodward. I stay off the Lodge. It's just crazy shit happening on the Lodge there. It's interesting. The State of the Union is basically a cheerleading kind of thing. We don't expect, we should hear a little bit more negative, but it was all very positive. It was talking about it. It was interesting. He tried to put a big emphasis on black developers developing the city and saying that's a story that has a narrative, which I was curious to get Adolph's view on that. He was talking about all the black developers are involved in these big projects, in a city that is, still very impoverished. So I'm curious what you thought about that aspect of it.
Well, these are projects, these are same old, the usual suspects. The usual suspects, and I wonder what the percentage that some of these developers own in these projects. It's easy to put a face up there. He's good at that. I'm gonna tell you, Duggan is good at that. He uses props very well. And he throw the numbers out, and everything is going great. But you look at that project, a Herman Keitha project. He gave it to this white developer who basically can't deliver the goods. People are upset. They're real upset over there because all these empty houses. They've been trying to buy them. It's just a lot of things that's happening in the city that he doesn't address the situation. You don't see him. Now, whatever you want to say about the late Coleman Young, when we had a rash of schoolgirl rapes back in the early 80s, Coleman Young went and he got folks from everywhere, people that he didn't like, the corporate world. He called them together, and they was the eyes and ears of the street. he put an end to it. When the gangs stormed Cobo Hall, trying to take over downtown, Coleman Young got on TV and said, "I got the baddest damn gang in town," and they wear blue uniforms with silver badges. You don't see grandfathers and grandmothers that got kids that's in the Black Earl Flynn's and all these other gangs that they eradicated. I'm not saying they don't have gangs in this city, but they don't have generational gangs like they could have. But the Duggan has not done that. He would not get out in front. You know, people saying, "Where's the mayor at?" Another kid shot in the face. Another kid finds a gun. Somebody just broke in the house, 16-year-olds executing families and stuff. You got to address that. When will this end?
Well, you know, in D.C., you used to see council members show up at a homicide scene, which I doubt, and I doubt that's happening here.
Yeah, well, you might, if they show up at a homicide scene, they might get arrested for bribery. No, they're not showing up nowhere.
I want to hear what Fishman has to say.
I think Adolph hit it on the head, and I think referring to Coleman Young is exactly the accurate thing to say. I think that Mayor Young had a visceral knowledge of what was important to the citizens of the city. And I think that that's really what we're saying here. Is that if you go into neighborhoods and you ask people, if you ask 100 people, what's the thing you're most concerned about? 95 of them are going to say crime, just like Adolph was saying. Why? Because they're seeing it every day. And because, as Gil Scott-Heron predicted 40 years ago, everybody's got a pistol. Everyone is armed out there. And I think that the chief seems like he's doing a good job. But the tension, here's the tension, though. If you really want to stick a zillion cops out there, in a certain neighborhood, let's say, they're going to start stopping everybody. There's going to be incidents. There's going to be complaints from someone's mommy or someone's auntie who's going to say, "Oh, they roughed up my son," and blah, 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 blah. I'm not excusing police conduct like that. But if you expect or you ask a group of police officers, whether it's guys like Coleman got together or whether it's whatever group that the chief's going to get, a gang squad group or whatever, you're going to have some of that stuff. You are going to have people who get stopped for what they think is no reason. The question becomes, it's a balancing test. If you're really serious and you really want to put a stop to some of this shit that's going on out in the streets, there's going to be some stuff that you're not going to particularly like if it happens to be happening to your nephew or your son. But I believe, like Adolph says, I think that what people are most concerned about right now is crime. And I think most people will put up with it. Look at our parents put up with it. The cops stopped us whenever we wanted. Remember, Adolph? They stopped whenever they wanted. Where y'all going? What are you doing? You know, you'd go tell your parents, well, you know, I don't know, just keep your nose clean, blah, 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 blah. So the dynamic between
when Benny Napoleon was the head of the gang squad, listen, the criminals they wasn't scared of cops that wore uniforms. They were scared of the gang squad.
That's right.
Those are the people that put fear into them, made them piss their pants when they arrested them. And those are that's what they need. They know who the criminals are out there. There's 10 over here and there's 10 over there that's committing all the crimes. And folks need to get a rude awakening that's covering for these folks that breaks in houses, that shooting up cars.
But as long as the same people who want that to happen, the gang squad, you are absolutely right. As you know, I represented any number of those guys. Why? Because they were the gang squad, because they were out there trying to actually do something. Every now and then, something's going to happen where the police officer is going to either be called to account in the precinct itself or he's going to get charged with something. It's a balancing test. What are the citizens prepared to accept? If you really don't want the cops to mess with anybody, then don't gripe about crime. Because the only way you can put a stop to it is exactly what Adolph says. If you go into 5th Precinct and you ask the coppers who are out there, they'll tell you 40 guys who are committing 80% of the crap out there. Now, you want to unleash them on them? That's a decision for the society to make. That's a decision for the mayor to make. And obviously, going back to your original point, Coleman Young didn't ask 14 other guys around him. He said, hey, I've had enough of this crap, and we're putting a stop to it, and here's what we're going to do. That's, I believe, what we need in the city as well.
There's no question that people want to hear from the mayor. And listen, you can put on a great presentation, and you got all your appointees sitting up there clapping and standing up and et cetera. But people want to hear from the real deal. What are you doing? There was a time when Coleman Young wanted to take over DPS. They roadblocked that. And Duggan has been part of dismantling the public education. He was in control of the contracts when the state took it over. Listen, DPS is just like Chrysler. Every 5 years, somebody else come in and just rape it. And that's what they're doing now. Vitti is raping it, taking whatever he can take with his minions from Florida, and he's going to move on. He'll move on to the next school district. And the pandemic already wreaked havoc. Now you got about 30,000 students. They're talking about closing 10 or 15 schools. Damn, how many schools going to be left in the city of Detroit?
So let's talk about that for a second. So the plan by VD is $700 million over 5 years to go ahead and renovate the schools. The prediction or the estimate is actually we're going to need 2.1 billion just to get up to a good rating. But at the same time, we went from a school district of 250,000 students over 200 buildings to now something like 50,000 students over 107 buildings. Is it time to go ahead and let some of these buildings go? I mean, I know that there's a lot of very justifiable clamor by parents that schools that are close by are going to be shut down, but can we really save all of them?
Well, the district is full of empty schools. I mean, that's been the case for years. The loss of enrollment due to falling birth rates, of course, that's probably not the issue in Detroit. It's probably people leaving the district. That's a problem everywhere. That, including where I live, Grosse Pointe, Birmingham, et cetera. If I don't have an answer for this, but I do believe that that consolidating your resources in the places where they are most effective is probably a better strategy than leaving a bunch of failing schools open. It's kind of like how they tried to deal, the plan to deal with the shrinking city, bring people into the parts of it that are still viable, let the stuff that's surrounding it go to green space, and we'll invent a new city from that. So it's a shame because, what's happening is the charters, some people leave the district entirely. They move to the suburbs when they can, and they enroll in suburban schools. The parents who have a little bit of money might go parochial or private. The parents who don't have money, but they do believe that they can get a better education for their kids, will go charter. And then that leaves the poorest and the probably the least effective parents enrolling in the public schools, and that's just that's never a good thing. There's got to be something we can do.
Well, they had an opportunity back in the 70s with cross-district busing, and the Supreme Court narrowly defeated it. And now we see it. Only it wasn't volunteer. It was people looking for better schools. I call Detroit students refugees because they're all over the place. School districts that didn't have a black face for 100 years now got black students all over the place. Majority black students in East Point, Harper Woods, Westland, John Glenn, you name it. And most of these kids, a lot of them live in Detroit still, but they're looking for a better situation. And unfortunately, a lot of them are bringing the same problems that they had in the Detroit public schools. They take them across 8 Mile Road and across the borders. This is what we're dealing with. And a lot of these school districts don't have an idea how to deal with them. They need to look at what Oak Park went through in the 60s and the 70s when they were the only school district, basically, besides Ferndale, that had black students. And now some of these Birmingham and all these school districts that's getting an influx of Black students, they basically don't know how to deal with it. What are we going to do with what's left in Detroit? Look at Benton Harbor. I was up there as a newspaper reporter back in the early 80s, and all the students was leaving Benton Harbor, the good students and the athletes was going to neighboring school districts. And all they left in Benton Harbor was the special ed students and students that couldn't get out of the district. And this is what's happening in Detroit. You got Cass, you got the Renaissance, and King, and a few other schools. That's what it's going. That's what's left here in Detroit. Right. An empty school building. You can sell them to charter schools. That's what they're doing now, anyway.
It's interesting. The State of the City address, where we talk about all this great development, this grand development, and still talking about the Hudson's development, talking about all these other, major units that are being built, and we hear there's such a disconnect. We hear nothing about education. What are these people doing? Usually when people buy a property, buy a home, they want to check into the school system. They want to check in, right. There's no connect there between the Hudson's building and education, like a school downtown. And I don't know if part of that is because the school district is separate from the mayor's office, or the developers aren't pressured into.
But the mayor should be involved, whether he control it or not. He should use his soapbox to advocate for better schools. Now we just saw a home in Palmer Woods sell for $5 million almost. Say somebody had kids that bought that house. Where were they going to send them to school at over there? That they want to send them to school.
Right.
And that's an area where, when I was growing up, you had about 4 or 5 elementaries and junior high, middle schools, junior highs right around there. That was good schools. Mm-hmm. You don't have that anymore. And why would I buy something with some small kids if I gotta pay tuition? The tuition costs more for my kid to go to school than what my mortgage costs. I could get another house somewhere.
You're buying a $5 million house. You probably have enough to handle tuition for your kid.
But what about the ones that want to come back to Detroit and they got kids and they saying, I don't know if they're a school that they can go to, or I got to drive 10 miles to take them.
That's why so much of the influx of new residents in Detroit tends to be young and childless or old and empty nesters. Right. So for that very reason, because of school.
Well, my nephew lives in Bangalore. His mother happens to be an art teacher at Roper, so he goes to Roper. He was going to the school in Indian Village before that, but they're all private schools and they cost money.
Yeah.
Well, as far as the Birmingham Public School District, apparently they might need a calculator, because looks like they made a slight discrepancy. They put down their budget for $1.6 million when it's actually $14 million. So about an order of magnitude off. And apparently, along with this very big and bourgeois oops, don't worry, because they have a $20 million rainy day fund, which they might then have to dip into. So definitely a tale of two districts up and down the Woodward corridor that we see. But, I have to say something. I can't believe how cynical you are. Were you not inspired and energized by Mayor Duggan's Blight to Beauty hook? I mean, borrowing from the alliteration of the White House of Build Back Better. I mean, there's a lot of BS's going on around here. So we got
ride down Mac and you'll see Blight to Blight.
True.
Go to some of these neighborhoods. You'll see Blight to Blight. Go over a 7 Mile in Woodward. You see Blight to Blight. Oh, you got a church that's on Woodward that has been 15 years or so, and they still haven't finished it. It's a big empty church.
perfecting.
Only in Detroit could that happen. Any place else, they would have forced their hand and say either you tear this thing down or you finish it. In Detroit, it's like a monument to nothing.
Well, in all fairness, though, Adolph, I don't think they finished off La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona either.
Hey, but I've been to Barcelona, and you can go inside the church. They still have service. Yeah, if you go inside this building, you probably have to take an exterminator with you.
All right, you win on that one. Steve, I know you're going to have to leave soon, but so I don't want you to go without giving me your prediction for the Final Four.
You know, I haven't even really thought about that. I know you guys think I do nothing but watch basketball. I really don't.
You cried yesterday. You cried. They blew it.
I see, Adolph, I was looking at the same screen because I was at work and I'm watching it on my screen and I'm literally sitting there shaking my head like this. And all of a sudden, one of my Michigan teammates, who's a Detroit guy from Northeastern, Willie Edwards, calls me and he says, I can't repeat exactly what he said, but he says, what the is going on out there? Final Four, I have to say, just from what I read, that big kid at Gonzaga sounds like he's unreal. They win game after game. So if I was going to pick somebody, I'd pick them. I like either Illinois or Purdue out of the Big Ten. I haven't seen the other teams, but I think both Illinois and Purdue, they both have real good coaches, and they got good big guys, and they got good point guards. So I would hope, but I can't tell you anything about the rest of the country.
Arizona got a great team.
Yeah, because they played us, and they're really terrific.
They blew us off the court.
I agree with you. Arizona's another one you can watch.
And your thoughts on? We got the two Michigan people here. Your thought, or three actually. The thoughts on Juwan Howard's mea culpa.
Well, you know, listen. The only problem I had, they needed to suspend the assistant coach from Wisconsin. You cannot put your hands. I don't care how slight of it was. You cannot put your hands on another person, and especially somebody that's like Juwan. He coaches hard. He played hard. He messed up, but Wisconsin messed up too. You know, there's no question that they need to move on with it. He got smacked a little bit.
I think that he handled himself exactly in the correct way. Obviously, Adolph and I both know certain things that's not out there in the public eye. Adolph mentioned it about putting your hands on people. A lot of people in general don't really understand what we're talking about when we say that. We're not going to try to explain it to them right now. But it wasn't just that, Adolph. I happen to have some information. It's what the coach, that assistant, said to Juwan. He didn't use the bad word, but what he said, if he'd have said that if we're playing out at St. Cecilia's or playing outside at Mumford, everybody would have been on.
He would have got his ass kicked.
I will say nothing more than that. But I think he handled himself well, and I think you just move on from there. That's all.
So, Alan, I think we can probably invoke a member of the tribe who said, "He who hath not sinned cast the first slap." I think that's here. And what about
you need to watch In the Heat of the Night with Sidney Poitier, and you'll see what the slap is all about.
Right.
Oh yeah. Another great Rod Steiger role. So as well. Well, I mean, what about the rumor that U of M tanked the game in the second half just so that they could avoid a handshake again against Wisconsin? Not true.
Michigan State plays Wisconsin. We would have been in the process of losing to Illinois right now. Anyway.
Okay. So it was a couple of moments, Steve. Well, so excellent. Okay.
I have to go.
All right.
Do you want to hear my Schmuck of the week?
Yeah, let's hear your Schmuck.
It's the easiest one. Nancy already talked about. As usual, Lindsey Graham's always a candidate, but this was the classic. Because what gets me the most about him, if he were a real tough guy who had been a Marine like Bob Morgan in Vietnam, and he made a statement like that, but here's a guy who loves to hang around people who he thinks are tough guys who probably couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. And for him to make a statement like that as a United States Senator, we all probably think that. It would be wonderful if somebody killed a guy. Of course, everybody thinks it. But for a United States Senator to say it, Schmuck of the week, and everybody have a good weekend, and I'm gone.
All right. Happy belated. Okay.
Take it easy, Steve.
So events and happenings in other states, I mean, instead of just piling on here in Michigan, we have the state of Florida. And I know my predecessor in the role, Craig Foley, would always find something happening in Florida that amused and bemused everybody. So Florida has the so-called "Don't Say Gay" law, which passed, much at the insistence of Governor Ron. What are you still wearing masks for, DeSantis? And of course, it has created now a bit of a national conversation. What do you think of that? And where do you see this law going, both politically as well as legally?
Well, I'm gonna tell you, the Republicans lost their minds. A principal in Mississippi was fired because he read a book that had the word "but" in it. To second graders, they fired him. Look at what the Texas Republicans doing: abortion. Florida, and the Democrats are sitting on their behinds, and everybody's saying, well, the courts are going to take care of a lot of this crazy mess. But you got judges sitting up there that Trump put in office, and it used to be, they went by the rules of the law. But now it's like, okay, that's legal. They can do it. I don't know where, you can go to jail in Florida for saying gay. If I'm in a classroom and I wanted to teach you about Harriet Tubman, you can go to jail. You can get sued. You can get arrested. You don't say gay. In a minute, everything that come out of your mouth better not be about anything. Otherwise, you might find yourself being booked.
It's the Taliban state. Go ahead, Nancy.
I just want to say one thing, and I mean, this is probably a little oblique, and it's a long game. But the one thing I learned from living in Indiana is, and it probably does not apply to Florida because these are not comparable states, but you can cut taxes all you want and to lure business, and you can appoint a committee to come in and give everybody free shoe shines, when they do site selection. But ultimately, what draws companies, particularly companies that rely on, brain talent as opposed to, and everybody is brain talent now, is decent schools and because people want to raise their families in a place where they can send their kids to a public school and they don't have to worry about it, that it's going to be a reasonably good education. Of course, parents always have to do their part. But if you start larding up your public school district with all this bullshit, sooner or later, the Apple computer is going to say, you know what, we're going to be just as happy in Arizona or wherever. I mean, it doesn't really matter. So if they want to keep doing this, that's fine. I remember I was up north a few years ago on a reporting assignment, and we were sitting in a very almost deserted bar. And the bartender started talking to the bartender, and it turned out he was a teacher from Florida. And he had come here because one of his parents needed some sort of complicated surgery that would have required a long recovery period. He took a year's leave of absence to come up and help his parents. He was talking about what it's like to teach in Florida. It was amazing. And this was 5-6 years ago. And it was mostly the testing, the constant testing. He said, and everything is teach to the test. So he said, whatever kind of, if as a teacher, sometimes, you want to go off on an interesting tangent because you can make connections for kids and, illuminate their worlds in a new way. He said, you just can't do that because you're completely stuck teaching to the test. They test for something like 3 weeks, or maybe it was longer than that. It was just an insane amount of time. So don't say gay. Add, no critical race theory, which isn't being taught anyway, and sooner or later you're gonna feel it. That's me.
Well, you were seeing this happening with curricula as well. I mean, changing textbooks. This is a big thing.
Well, did you see that the AP program, the Advanced Placement Program, which parents of college-bound kids know a lot about, because that is the key to getting into a selective college, is how many AP classes are on your transcript. And they're saying we're not going to offer AP classes in schools where teachers cannot talk about, or have to or can't talk about certain things, or as in the case of these Hillsdale charter schools, where they're supposedly teaching that Martin Luther King did not favor changing civil rights laws. He wanted more of a softer cultural change. It's just what a bunch of crap. And when those people start bowing out, then you'll see some parents pushing back against this stuff.
Yeah.
Hillsdale.
Go ahead.
I get that newsletter from Hillsdale. I don't know how I've been getting it for years. Yeah. And it's just, I've tried to engaging the president in conversation on with emails, and he does not bite.
So Steve has two mommies out, but How You Doing, the autobiography of Jimmy Swaggart in all Florida schools. Is that where we're heading?
I think so.
Yeah, the Dan White Society lecture by Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
These people are out of their damn minds.
This bill is it's so absolutely ridiculous. It's like they just can't help themselves to create a situation just so they can justify alienating a group of people they don't like. Nobody in K through 3 is taking sex education classes. Nobody is being groomed into thinking that they're gay or whatnot from teachers and what they're teaching. This is only going to alienate kids. If we're not normalizing something that is normal, then what's going to happen to these kids when they grow up and their peers aren't, aware that this is a normal thing?
Kids K through 3 are not taking sex ed classes like you and I took when we were in high school.
Yeah.
But there is an age appropriate curriculum that some kids take where it's around things like your body. Is it okay for people to touch your body if you don't like it? It's a way to kind of instill in kids this sense of themselves as autonomous beings. Of course, a lot of these parents don't accept that.
Or you can be like the state rep candidate who told his daughters, if you get raped, just lay back and enjoy it. Nothing wrong with a little rape.
Now that might be somebody's schmuck of the week.
Yeah, we have so many candidates running who are really, and they happen to be Republicans. Well, really, it's just pure embarrassment, the idiocy of their remarks. I mean, we even have I wrote a column about Kevin Rinke, former car dealer, Bloomfield Township businessman, who was telling people, sending out emails saying, sign this petition, let Governor Whitmer know we no longer want to have a lockdown for the pandemic. And I wrote and said, we don't have a lockdown for the pandemic. It's like the idiocy. And that's one of the more milder things that is going on. We have all these other candidates. It's just embarrassing.
You're dangerously close to edging into the last segment of this show.
Oh, okay. Let's save that. You let me know when we're ready for.
But what about the idea of what the hell happened to COVID? I mean, we're down to now, I think, 500 cases a day in Michigan, which means that's what, six cases per county, and those counties where it seems as though the vaccination rates are lower have the higher incidence. Things look pretty good in the Tri-County area. It makes that trucker convoy look real stupid, heading for DC. Notwithstanding the politics and the rhetoric, do you think we've cautiously and optimistically turned a corner here?
Yes and no. Yes, I think we've turned a corner. I think people have just decided they're done. I mean, I don't think this is, and the fact that the Omicron surge generated a lot of numbers, but generally speaking, less severe cases, kind of embedded in people's brains. And the fact that now has peaked and is sharply down. I think our positivity rate is down below 4% now. Around New Year's Day, it was about 45%. So that's saying something. People have just decided. And the only thing that really worries me, I mean, contrary to what some people want to believe about those of us who are COVID cautious, I don't enjoy wearing a mask. I don't enjoy doing taking all of these precautions and and having things be closed and, limited capacity, et cetera. I like going to concerts. I like doing these things. But what I worry about is if there's another surge, and there will be another surge, probably when either in midsummer when people are really out socializing, or more likely in the fall again. And if it's a worse variant this time, I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, like I said, people have just decided they're done. And
I think we're going to see another potential fourth booster, or it'll just be another vaccination. Like the flu shot is every year. We don't call it a booster. Every year we just call it a flu shot. I think the one thing, I think the numbers are going in the right direction. Things are good for now. We don't know, as Nancy says, we don't know if there's another variant around the corner. But one of the bigger concerns is that it's still running rampant in like Africa and other nations where we're not getting the vaccination out there. People are still dying in big numbers. So long as it's still spreading around the world, we saw it came from like China and Europe. People travel these days. People are, how does the, the new Delta suddenly popped up in Bay City? Different, the South African variant pops up in, so I think there has to be a world effort to help eradicate it. And I don't think we're there yet. And I think we have too many vaccines here. The vaccines are expiring here in Michigan. We're not using up enough. We need to get those vaccines overseas.
Right. Omicron came from was first identified, I should say, in South Africa. And it was from what I remember reading at the time, it was a variant that developed because South Africa has the highest percentage of people living with HIV. And so what they would do is they would contract COVID, and then because they had a suppressed immune system to fight it, this virus would just knock around in their bodies forever, mutating and so forth. And eventually we ended up with a new variant as a result of that. So yeah, we really do need to concentrate on the rest of the world now. I mean, it would be really nice if we could concentrate on the rest of the world, having gotten our own vaccination rate up to say 87 or 89 or 92%. But, as we saw on all the trucker convoys, man, you'll vaccinate my cold, dead body and live with it,
and like it.
Die gasping. That's all I have to say to those people.
By the way, Alan, Delta got to Bay City because an Indian guy took a wrong turn on the Zilwaukee Bridge.
I believe that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Are we ready for
for you, Alan, the new technical engineer, to do this? We are ready.
Now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week.
Seamless transition.
Wow. Through the tutelage of Michael Lucido. He's
love that little dose of Greg Valley.
Michael, the honor goes to you to get us started with who's the Schmuck of the Week.
All right. My Schmuck of the Week is former Dallas State Senator Don Huffins, who is also a Greg Abbott challenger, for taking credit for removing LGBTQ plus suicide prevention information off of the Texas Department of Health and Human Services website.
Oh, what a nice guy.
Wow.
Just
special. He's special.
Amazing. Just an amazing person to take credit for that.
How much of a Grinch do you have to be to pull something like that off?
You know what? So when we have a school shooting, it's always, well, they're probably having mental health issues. But then you turn around and then you do stuff like this and you take away those mental health services for just a certain group of people. It's amazing.
Unbelievable. Okay. Adolph.
Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona, who supports anti-Semitic, white racist state senator named Wendy Rogers. And he says he'd rather have a white supremacist and racist in office than a Democrat.
What a great guy. What another great guy.
What a country.
I mean, at least he's conceding where the distinction lies between the two political parties.
Yeah, he's not running for re-election because he can't. and they tried to get him to run the GOP to run against Mark Kelly in Arizona, and he won't do it because I don't think he can get elected. Arizona is turning blue every day. You know, people are upset there because folks from California is making their way into Arizona.
What is it with the last name Ducey? I mean, Pete Ducey from Fox News gets routinely bitch slapped by Jen Psaki in the White House briefing, and it's glorious.
It really is.
Listen, if you go to Phoenix and you go by the state capitol, these guys are so heartless that you got a homeless tent city 2 blocks from the state capitol. They got to drive by it every day. The go to work, and it doesn't faze them one bit.
They don't care.
Not one bit.
No.
Yeah, Pete Ducey reminds me of Kevin Bacon in Animal House, where he's like bent down. Thank you, sir. May I have another? That's really him in the news conference. Nancy, who's your schmuck of the week?
Well, I always come into this with 2 in case somebody grabs my first one. And I thought RJ Regan was almost too obvious. If rape is inevitable, lie back and enjoy it, which is actually, people act as though this was just something that sprung out of his head that he tells his kids. But it's an old shitty barroom type expression that anyway. But that's not my schmuck. My schmuck this week, I decided, is Perry Johnson, the GOP gubernatorial candidate, who has indicated with his latest ad that he is going to make election integrity one of his issues with his bringing his quality. And he actually says in his ad that he's going to hold Detroit accountable for mistakes in their elections. He doesn't say anything about Livonia, which, as I recall, had more discrepancies in their counting than Detroit did in 2020. He doesn't mention any other community. It's just Detroit, which is, as I was telling somebody yesterday, that's not a dog whistle. That is standing out on the front porch going, here boy, here boy, here boy. And that's just racist. It's racist bullshit, but that's who Perry Johnson apparently is.
It is
and Detroit. I thought Detroit did a great job in 2020. The state sent extra people to help with the election, which I think made a big difference.
Which Mr. Quality Guru knows nothing about, apparently.
Right.
So,
but I think it's a smack at Craig because he thinks Craig is going to get some votes out of Detroit, and so he's making that part of his campaign.
Well, why would he smack at Detroit to get votes from Craig? Because first of all, no Republicans are going to get that many votes out of the city of Detroit. I mean, they're going to get some.
Well, the 5 votes that they vying for,
Yeah. Well, if they really wanted to talk about where Donald Trump lost Michigan, they'd be in Oakland County. But of course, Oakland County is full of white people. So there you go.
I think Craig will get more votes than the average Republican. Is that fair to say, Adolph?
Yeah, I think it was.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so? You think?
No, Craig is an idiot. Craig, if you're listening to the show, up it, Craig.
Aren't you going to call him the coward of the county again?
Yeah, he is the coward of the county. We need to play that song.
Oh, that's got to be the new outro. Well, I mean, what really bothers me, Nancy, is it's also such an insult to his young doppelganger, Clay Aiken.
Yeah. The other thing I learned about Perry Johnson this week, he has school-age children, like 12 and 13.
Wow.
Go figure.
Maybe he's Clay's age. Okay. Maybe he's Clay's age and just has aged poorly. So I'm torn about my my schmuck of the week because there's a couple of good ones here.
Don't forget Alan.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I was gonna have it. Okay, Alan, please.
Oh well, I can defer to you.
I thought we were going like counterclockwise, so that's okay.
All right. All right, I'll jump in. Mine is North Carolina Congressman Madison Cawthorn, who has come out and called the Ukrainian President Zelensky a thug and incredibly evil. And I just watched this morning, I watched a news clip where a few days after he said that, he held a meeting. They banned the press from there, and it was just, he wouldn't comment on it. And it's just, it's the party of trollers now, is, they just say, they just say shit to piss people off. And as Michael said, they just say stuff to alienate the other side. They know we're just going to, you watch Tucker Carlson for a few minutes and you're like, oh my God, what is this guy saying? Can't there be can I reach through the TV screen? It's just crazy. And they say so many, stupid stuff. So what's the point of this guy even, attacking Zelensky? I mean, the people in Ukraine are dying. They're being murdered. Children, are being killed. And how about taking a little shot at Putin?
Well, even Senator Jody Ernst from Iowa called him out onto the carpet in the Senate for this. I mean, it's going too far. And I mean, let's face it, that he's more Trump than Trump. Trump has kind of taken his foot off the gas, but this whole thing about how Zelensky betrayed the point of trying to incriminate Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
It seems as though that's the axe that's still being ground here by Madison Cawthorn. Well, I'm so glad, Nancy, that you halted me, because Alan went ahead and took one of my two schmucks.
Oh, wow.
So that makes it a lot easier for me. Being here in the Chicagoland area, this, I suppose, is very apt. My schmuck of the week is none other than former actor Jussie Smollett.
Oh.
Who was convicted of lying to the authorities for an alleged hate crime for being Black, gay, and Jewish. And apparently it was proven to be a hoax. He was sentenced yesterday to 150 days in prison, along with having to pay restitution for the price of the investigation that it cost. On his way out of the courtroom and into the pokey, he was seen and heard yelling, "I'm innocent and I am not suicidal," which I think the last person who said that was Jeffrey Epstein. So, Jussie, you're my schmuck of the week.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
All right.
So there we go. All the tumblers came together. Michael, thank you for all that you've done for Deadline Detroit. We're gonna miss you, but good luck on your next voyage.
Thank you. I'm gonna miss it a lot.
Yeah, we're gonna miss you, and particularly the technical backup for the show now.
Yeah.
Except that Alan was just so completely seamless with it that there are call centers in India that will be sending headhunters for him.
Yeah, well, I want to say thanks to Michael. Michael's been great. He's been with us 3.5 years. Been a great colleague, great friend. He's done some great videos and photography. We're really, and just
we'll miss him.
A great part of our staff.
But he gets to come. He gets to come to the staff parties as an ex officio staff member.
Yes,
alumnus
for sure.
So.
And being a civilian means you don't have to be on injured reserve or any other kind of reserve. So there you go. You can enjoy.
Exactly.
Adolph Mongo, thank you for being on. Great seeing you again.
Great to have me.
Nancy, great seeing you. Thank you. And thank you, Alan. And last word to you.
Drive home safely.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.